Okay, well, we have a lot of ground to cover, so I guess we'll get started. I wanted to say good day to everyone and welcome to our first combined Canadian user group presentation. Sorry about the short notice, but we did want to get something in before the summer holidays and before people got busy. We're literally covering coast to coast today, and we welcome each and every one of you. So thanks for taking the time. My co-host is Murray Hunt. He's with the Calgary Board of Education and the leader of the Calgary user group. And I'm Ayanna Ciatti with Horizon, and I help out a few of the other ones. Murray is with us, and he's going to be presenting later in the session, so we'll definitely hear lots from him soon. Special welcome to those of you from Newfoundland. We have people from the Ontario user group, the Canadian federal users, the Calgary user group, which I believe have a room, and those of you who have joined us from the West Coast. So that would be the British Columbia group and the Vancouver Island. I know some of you are gathered into the session rooms. I know that out in Calgary, you've got a number of people, and I think Danielle in Ottawa here with Public Works or PSPC has also gathered a few folks. So I hope you're seeing and hearing us okay today, and that you will certainly have time to chat afterwards with each other. I wanted to take a minute to sort of set the tone for today's event. It's going to be more of a presentation type of session. Usually we prefer to do this face-to-face. That's usually always better and more fun, but we definitely want to or even do an open mic style for the online meetings. But today we've got lots of ground to cover and we've only got 2 hours, so we will keep people muted except for the presenters, and we'll follow up at the end with some short Q&A. You can type your questions as you hear or think of them into the dialog box on the GoToMeeting console. So sit back and relax. We are always interested in what you want to hear about, so your feedback for these sessions is essential to helping your groups provide the value for you. Many of you are clients of ours and are pretty well known to us, and certainly all of you are professionals in the facilities and who use ARCHIBUS, or else you've either here by mistake or you've downloaded the presentation in error. So in that case, you can leave. The rest of us, we're heads up, we are recording the webinar. We usually try to do these so that we can share with those people that can attend. And we believe certainly that by sharing knowledge, experience, and lessons learned among the users, business partners, ARCHIBUS themselves, and any folks interested in the tool and in all the considerations around the system is one of the best ways to promote the value and create efficiencies of scale for any kind of IWMS system. And if you want to call it ERP, CMMS, CAFM, CRE, or whatever the flavor of the day acronym is that you use. Certainly sharing this expertise, gathering stories, sharing knowledge is important to not only your success and our client's success, but also important to understanding the evolution of technology in the workplace. So it is, there's a lot of things that are happening right now. It's a burgeoning, big data and all the trends that you see on the screen there are things that you guys are probably dealing with. I certainly know lots of our clients are dealing with them, and at Nexus it's all top of mind. Together we're better. By discussing the issues and challenges and solutions together, we can see how others have overcome obstacles and can increase our understanding of how to get the best ROI out of our technology investment, out of the money we've spent, and create successes together. These sessions are often a time to explore new areas or learn about the strategies and tools available. So this is one of the reasons why Horizon and why we support AUGs and why we invest in speaking and invest the time and effort to support organizations like IFMA and ARPIC and the international Nexus events. So if you don't know what IFMA, I mean, obviously you know what in the International Facility Management thing. They also have regional shows, and ARPIC is the Real Property Institute of Canada. So we're pleased to be here to help facilitate things today, and we welcome some of the experts in their own fields here, and certainly welcome you. For all of us, ARCHIBUS is bringing us together, or certainly the need for connecting. Developing business needs emerge, and the demand for database decision making and dashboard style real-time analytics has increased. As cost management and risk mitigation and compliance benchmarking is required more and more from a top down. Together we can help plan for and manage and prioritize requirements, data, processes, workflow using the tools available, and either alone or integrated with other systems. So by building out this network together, making folks, showing them the latest enhancements and best practices, and we can serve and strengthen our positions and do a lot greater good for our organizations. A few words on ARCHIBUS Suite. It's not only great for space utilization and building operations, and it is a powerful suite of integrated applications or modules, which you may not work in today, but you or some of you are. Cover areas including things like asset management, workplace services, move management, real estate and leasing, strategic financial analysis, project management, capital budgeting, and even to the things like the environmental health and safety, training, and those kinds of things, and energy management and sustainability, like tracking initiatives. So it touches on so much more than just what some people think of it. It certainly is a kick-ass space and operations tool with a great tracking occupancy and asset tracking. But more and more today's agile companies are looking at de-siloing data and systems to meet today's systems and to meet the demands on them. ARCHIBUS is in good shape to help organizations with its flexibility, security, functionality. It can all help. And most importantly, it is proven and working for people like you and like us. These applications can all integrate well with other data systems, and together it can act as the engine or the foundational platform for a total ERP system, which is the enterprise resource planning. And just like the new kids on the block, like all the sort of point solutions that are cropping up all over the place, ARCHIBUS is available and fully deployable on cloud using a SaaS or term licensing and hosted options. And then of course, what most of you people are in, who are on the line today, are on the traditional on-premise models with full control. It's also mobile friendly, has the latest navigations, analytics, and publishing, as well as the document storage and all kinds of enhancements that you see in the enhancement webinars that come out, and as your account managers kind of work with you to show you what's around. The agenda today is really 5 short and sweet 15 to 20-minute presentations on several topics of interest by users and by some experts here. And I'd like to add that as you listen today, if you have ideas or topics, or you want to present, or you want to host a meeting going forward, get in touch with your leader, like your AUG leader, or contact me. And it's really a chance to help guide the content and the conversations, and these meetings are yours, so we definitely want to hear from you. So today we have with us we have Daniel Perrien, and he's with the National Research Council, and Wayne Lico, who are going to talk about technology road mapping. We also have Murray Hunt, as I said before. He's co-chairing the meeting, or co-hosting. He's going to talk about lean management techniques with ARCHIBUS, or just techniques. And we have Tiffany Lamb on the line with us as well. She's going to be doing mobile asset management with the focus mostly, I think, on the mobile. And Jason Deweese is also with us from ARCHIBUS, and he's going to talk about BIM standards and some of those things. The last one will be the Internet of Things and actual real-time utilization with sensors, and that with Tiffany Lamb. And then we'll have a bit of time to open things up, Q&A. Kind of a, it's a tight thing. We haven't built in any rest breaks, so feel free to leave if you need to and come back. We are really excited. I'm going to turn the floor over to Wayne Lico and Danielle for our first presentation.
Thanks, Diana. Wayne here. I have a very short thing, which is to primarily introduce Danielle and have him take the lead here with the presentation. Just a quick reminder, if you do have any questions, there's a chat box that you can type them into. Given the number of people on the call today, that'll probably be the most efficient way. We'll be monitoring that, and we'll bring the questions forward and get them addressed as we go through. So without further ado, Danielle has been with the federal government for quite a while in a number of capacities, and currently right now he's the director over at the National Research Council, and been involved with a number of real property initiatives across the federal government with different departments. So it brings a lot of experience to bear, and he's now in charge of, what would you say, Danielle, an aging infrastructure at the NRC campus on Montreal Road here in Ottawa. So with that, I'll let you take the lead.
All right, thank you very much, Wayne. Very quickly, I've been in real property for 25 years. I've been with the NRC for a little bit less than 2 years. As a director of real property, I act as the custodian and manage a diverse national portfolio of real property, which includes such things as offices, laboratories, telescopes to see stars, telescopes to pick up radio frequencies, and yes, even wave pools, all in the name of science. I'm also responsible, I guess, for all of the consolidations and rationalizations of space, the custody transfers out of our portfolio, leasing arrangements, and space optimizations, pretty much the whole gamut of real property services. I also oversee the development of long-term strategies and plans for this national real property portfolio. And as Wayne alluded to, it is an aging portfolio, so we have to start planning ahead. Here's a bit of context for you. The National Research Council is the only government corporation that suffered a severe cyber attack back in 2014, rendering many of our corporate systems and tools almost inoperable. But in 2016, we decided we needed a plan. So let me see if I can do this little thing here. All right. So I'm a little bit new at this, so you have to bear with me. So we felt we needed a roadmap, a technology roadmap, actually, to be more precise, a plan that matched short-term and long-term goals with specific technology solutions to meet these goals. So our approach was to develop a high-level roadmap with timelines and costs. The intent was not for this to take 6 to 12 months or to be an expensive exercise. This roadmap was achieved by sitting down with the right people and specific outcomes in mind. And I can tell you, as a director of real property, I was probably the one who had the most specific outcomes in mind. Today, I'll run you through how we did this and the outcome. I'll walk you through some of our factors, but not necessarily all the definitions. I encourage you to chat with Horizon for those details if you're interested. All right, so let me see how I can do this again. There we go. So here's our current state. Where we are today is that we have a legacy installation that tracked data but hasn't delivered on the reporting capability to make informed decisions. We realized we needed more, we needed to be modern, and we identified our desired state. We wanted to move from ARCHIBUS version 18 on a single desktop to Web Central and the cloud, and in today's modern era. So step one was revisiting what the vision for our group was at the NRC. And for me, what resonated as the custodial representative was that I needed to be able to assure that we had sound stewardship of our real estate holdings, and we needed to do that through a total cost of ownership. So again, here I go with the little arrow. Making sure that we could measure the success of the technology solutions, we mapped it to the value to be delivered. So in other words, what we were trying to do is we were trying to identify our business objectives. Now, some may resonate with you, others maybe not so much. But as a former accommodation manager for many years in the government, my number ones were all about space tracking. I could not, when I first arrived, I could not tell you what I had in the portfolio and what was vacant and what was not. So we then considered elements that would help us move forward and achieve success. And in my mind, data collection, reporting capabilities, and having live data were critical. And of course, our challenge is understanding the roadblocks so that we could plan for and mitigate their effect on our success. As many of us know in the federal government, quite often funding is definitely a challenge. So the results are top 12 objectives. We applied scoring, as you can see on this slide, to arrive at the totals. And through this straightforward exercise, we can now see not only what's important to us, but also what we might achieve sooner than later. Meeting our objectives is important, but doing it in a sustainable and timely manner is equally important. So keeping in mind our investment and our off-the-shelf approach, we mapped our objectives to the software components we felt we needed in ARCHIBUS. From there, we developed a budget and a timeline for everything. If you look at the timeline in this slide, you'll notice it's over approximately 2 to 3 years. That allowed us to plan their funding requirements and insert placeholders in budget exercises, because in the federal government, you have to be able to show how much money you're going to need now and 5 years from now. So we may not do it all, and we know things like government priorities will change, but at least we are prepared. More importantly, we're moving out of the past and into a well-planned future. And that would be it for me.
Thanks, Danielle. I think that the main thing here is that, as you pointed out, the exercise was meant to be a light effort. Obviously, doing these roadmaps can be more involved and can go into a whole other level of detail. But that wasn't, again, the objective, right? When we started out these conversations was to, let's call it fast track. You had certain objectives that you wanted to meet within certain timelines. And so getting to those was kind of the priority of
yeah, and I mean, ultimately, when I arrived, there had already been a period of time where the organization had been without a fully active modern system. So there was a bit of, okay, you've arrived now, hit the ground running and get it going. And I think that when I was thinking about if there was anything I had to do over again, I think the one thing I would have done is I would have called you sooner. So that we could get this moving, because it was a nimble exercise. It was a very productive exercise, and the objectives that came out were in fact the objectives of the organization. So we didn't create new objectives. We are mirroring what the organization requires.
I really like the scoring, the way that you guys were able to figure out exactly what should be done first, and that just by a simple, time and value and risk. Man.
Yeah, and that was the eye opener, actually. That was how well that exercise came out, was that we kind of sat back afterwards and had these aha moments and went, wow, this is exactly how we should have lined ourselves up. So we were very happy with that exercise.
Right, and most organizations are faced with this idea of time crunches, but also the enablers and the roadblocks. And many times, we'll see that happen where somebody goes down a path where there's really some roadblocks that are either going to delay things or in some cases be insurmountable. So regardless of whether it's a priority item, I remember with a client, integration with SAP was a high priority. Once they understood the IT involvement and that requiring, 18 to 24-month lead time, it changed the priority. It was allowed them to go and focus on things that they could achieve in a shorter time frame, and still keep in mind that they wanted to get to this integration. So it's as you say, an eye opener to kind of go through that.
Yeah. And I must admit, over the last couple of months, it's been a very painless exercise, but a very productive one.
Great. Well, thank you, Danielle, for that. I'll pass it back to Ayanna and let you introduce Murray.
Okay. Well, Murray, I can see your screen okay, and I'd like to welcome Murray Hunt. He's with the Calgary Board of Education. A lot of you know him very well, either from Nexus events or from like the main stage, for example, or he's been with, Calgary Board of Education for 6 years or so and counting, and has done some really wonderful things. So let's sit back and let you take it away. I have unmuted you, Murray, so we should be good.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the introduction, Ayanna. So, as Ayanna said, I've been with the school board for about 6.5 odd years, coming up on 7, and I've been writing the ARCHIBUS for coming up on 21 or 22 years now. So I've been around and seen a number of different things, and one of the things that I've seen throughout all of the years of doing ARCHIBUS is the better that we plan and understand our current states and what our ideal states are, just like NRC did, the more likely we are to be successful. So one of the things that the Calgary Board of Education has been doing, which is definitely not Dilbert, is we've embraced lean management techniques. So lean is something that typically we would see coming from manufacturing processes. But the philosophies behind lean and some of the analysis tools that we use in lean are used to inform us about what our current state is, so that we can start looking at making informed business process information. So contrary to my cartoons, it's not about more meetings. What it's actually about is really trying to understand and engage with the different levels of the organization around what are the pain points that we can use our IWMS systems to improve. So with any organization, it's always important to have many layers or many levels within the organization be on board with the work that the organization is doing. So for example, the lean processes that I'm going to be talking about, which could also be called business process improvement or continual improvement or business process reengineering or business analysis or whatever. They all entail playing with pretty colored Post-it notes and colored felt pens on whiteboards. It's really all about understanding the current state. And so having the organization embrace the process and the value of understanding what the organization actually does is key to the success of all of these different types of endeavors. So when we look at the Calgary Board of Education, we have our facility operations group had actually been the ones, the cleaners and the facility operators that really wanted to start embracing the lean analysis tools. And they started, we got some really good traction at fairly senior management level. And now what we're doing is, as an organization, throughout facilities anyway, we are looking at we've done some training so that everybody is working from a common language of understanding. So when we talk about some of the interesting terminology that we're using within the CBE, everybody knows exactly what that terminology means. And really the focus of all of these business process analysis tools is understanding the value of the tasks that we're trying to accomplish. So when I'm putting work requests in and I'm putting this data in and running a report, what's the value of that report? And are we doing it in a standardized and easily understood way so that as staff churn, we've got our standard processes in place. We don't have to go around fixing errors and all sorts of other wasteful efforts that happen when you don't understand your current processes. So I want to go next. There we go. But the most important part about lean is that there's all kinds of really cool Japanese terms that you can use. So when we look at one of the philosophies and the processes of business process analysis involved in lean is we want to go to where the work is happening. So having a bunch of managers sitting around in a meeting room discussing and whiteboarding and speculating on great ideas without actually involving the people that are doing the work and understanding where their pain points are is not going to be as effective as engaging the whole organization. So that's what go to Gemba is. It means go to the real place and actually engage with the people that are really doing the work to see where they have difficulties. We found this very useful when we start looking at something as simple as the work request initiation process with ARCHIBUS. So when our facility operators, and we've got 248 odd buildings now, so when our facility operators are putting work requests in, what are they actually finding that's difficult for them to do around those work requests? So when we engaged and we did some value stream mapping, which we'll talk about a little bit later, some of the changes and things that they came up with were very simple to implement. And they were very simple changes. Part of it was people processes that weren't working correctly. Some of it was software processes that could be improved within ARCHIBUS and tweaking some of that stuff. And so when we go and we actually go out to and talk to the people and do a Gemba walk, we're actually going to engage the frontline people who are using the system. So that's got a lot of follow-on benefits at a number of different levels when we start looking at system implementation, because immediately from a change management perspective, we've engaged the people who are using the system. So that's one of the key cornerstones of change management is you want the people who are going to be using the system to understand why it's being changed and what the benefits are and what they're actually going to realize as benefits as you get into it. The other thing that happens when you start engaging the folks that are actually using this stuff is you get a Kaizen event. And a Kaizen event is a change for the good. So these can be very small little improvements, process improvements, or hey, can you tweak this or move the field order, or why does that field isn't required when everybody should be putting it in? And you can very quickly look at really small changes and implementing, catching those small changes that really increase the value of the work that people are doing. They reduce errors. And one of the things that we'll talk about when we get into value stream mapping is catching the errors early on in the process so that we don't have to go back and do a lot of rework. So these small changes or Kaizen events are usually found when we're doing, going out and actually talking to people, doing a Gemba walk, or doing the value stream mapping. So some more fun Japanese terms for you, because why not? And one of them sounds like my name. There's the 3 M's of waste. So there's muda, which is pure waste. So this is work that we don't need to do. So that's when I export something out of ARCHIBUS into an Excel database and grind it around and do a bunch of reorganizing so that I can then print it and give it to someone, as opposed to saying, hey, can't you put a search restriction on that report so that you can just look at it live or have the other person look at it live? So that type of rework, when we start looking at the terminology of lean, is what we consider pure waste. That's work that provides absolutely no value to anybody. So the fact that I made a spreadsheet and gave it off to another supervisor, when that supervisor can go in and look at the current accurate data, is just a waste of time. So spreadsheets are great for doing analysis, but spreadsheets are really bad for being systems of record. So another area to look at when we start mapping things out is how are we overburdened? Where are our bottlenecks? So if we have 248 facility operators entering work requests and they go to one customer service representative to be analyzed and then redirected out to the trades in the field, then that customer service representative is actually overburdened with, could be overburdened with work and provides a bottleneck. So we're putting delays in the process. So when we actually start looking at doing value stream mapping, we're actually looking at what time does it take to do these tasks? What are the wait times? What are we looking at as far as how can we improve efficiencies and improve processing, which could be as simple as moving the fax machine closer to somebody's desk, right? So there's lots of things that we can do when we start looking at going out and seeing where the work is actually happening. And MURA is unevenness. So that means we've got batches of work coming in, we staff up for it, and then the batches of work go away and we're sitting around idle. So cross-training staff and having very clear processes in place helps us manage our unevenness so that we can have two CSRs who, when they're very busy in the morning, are nicely occupied but not overburdened. And then as the day progresses, they do a bunch of other work that is less time critical but still keeps them occupied. So looking at some of that workloading piece also will come out of different types of waste. So with value stream mapping, it's very important, and I know from my personal experience, being male and having been a business analyst for a long time, the very first place I want to go is fixing things. And I want to go and start solutioning, and I want to come up with all of these great ideas, and we can change this, and we'll do that, and we'll create a new report, and then hey, we'll write a new module, and it'll all be wonderful and perfect. And I always have to slow myself down, because without the grounding in what is our current state, it's very hard to know what am I doing, and if what I'm doing with my innovation is in fact a good innovation, or if it's just a change for change's sake. So what we really want to do when we start looking at our value stream map process is we want to take each step in an activity, whether that's the processing of a work request or whether that's the processing of an employee move, add, and change, and we want to map out the steps of the activity. And so for each step, we would want to know what's our time, what are the inputs, what do I need to do to be able to issue a work request? Well, I need to know what the problem type is, and I need to know who the requester was and the building and so forth. What are the outputs when my work request goes out? Well, it has to know what trade is going to be doing the work. It has to know what the priority is. Is it an emergency work request, or is it just a regular work request that can take some more time? What happens if there's an error? How far back in my process do I have to go to correct an error? So if I put the wrong work request on a cost that goes to Oracle Financial Systems, which created a requisition, which created a purchase order, and I then pay the invoice that's now on the wrong work request, which made the wrong journal entry in Oracle's GL, well, it's probably better for me to catch that and do that validation way earlier in the process than have to go and have a bunch of staff go and correct a whole bunch of different things, requisitions and POs and GL entries and so forth. So when we start looking at what are we doing for error checking as we go along, we can start building processes, and those processes again can be either archivist processes or people processes, but we know in fact what our current state is. And the very action of mapping that process out will start identifying those Kaizen events. So we will see, hey, well, what if we just did this tiny little change and auto-routed half of our work requests so that the CSRs don't have to do that, because we already know what the problem type is, and if it's a plumbing problem type and we know what building it is, well, why not send it directly to the plumber who works on that building? So that type of a little Kaizen event actually becomes very valuable in understanding what our long-term strategic direction and basically the punch list of items that we want to select and prioritize for what our strategic plan is going to be coming out of our IWMS team. So when we do that, we really want to try and focus only on the current state and place future state ideas in a parking lot. All future state ideas are valuable, and they may start informing some of the other work that we do in our strategic plans, but we want to ensure that we don't take that natural tendency to go problem solve before we really understand what our current states are. And if you're really artistic, you can have post-it note wars. And there were a couple of buildings in downtown Calgary, for those of you that were interested, that were looking across the street from each other. And so the staff in one of the oil companies decided that they were going to do post-it note messages to the people across the street from them. And the people across the street responded, and so they actually wound up having an art competition to see who could do the most fantastic post-it note art between these two different oil companies that were working in buildings across the street from each other. That's not what we want to do, though. So with this process and the continual lean journey of really understanding the value that we're creating by adding work to each step in our process, it's a continual process of moving towards perfection. We know we're never going to reach perfection because there's never enough money and there's never enough time, and staff changes and processes change and there's a new version of the software to come out. But the lean is a value-focused view of process improvement, meaning we're really looking at making changes that are going to improve our accuracy, improve the value that we're doing. We're not going to create a bunch of reports that nobody uses anymore. I know at one time back in a previous life before I was doing ARCHIBUS, I went in and we did some business analysis around less than truckload trucking company. And so there were 2 senior accounting clerks that spent 1 week a month preparing and creating this huge report back. This is back in the day when they had the 11 by 17 fanfold paper. So we had 2 full-time people working for a whole month to create this report that was about 4.5 inches thick. And they would give that to the senior vice president who was in charge of the logistics for the trucking company. And he'd been there for about 2 years. And so we asked him, so what do you use this report for? And he says, I have no idea. That was the guy who was here before me's report. All I do is I throw it in the filing room. And so this is the type of waste that we want to track by looking through the very specific details of our current state to say, why are we doing this? What's this report for? What risk is this report mitigating? What information is this providing senior management so that they can make decisions? What are the tools doing to provide us with operational efficiencies? This is all of the information that we really want to drive down to and get into when we start doing the analysis to build out our current states to work towards our IWMS plan, which leads us towards perfection. The other thing that I find that lean is very useful for, because it's looking at some of the granularity of the processes, is that it helps identify that constant innovation is not continual improvement. So change for change's sake is not necessarily an improvement. Thank you. So there's a short, quick review of the overall lean. There's lots sorts of lean courses. I know we've had a number of staff who've been taking about 4 weeks worth of courses to get to this point. So it's quite a valuable and interesting process.
Murray, what modules of ARCHIBUS are you guys using sort of to the fullest at the moment?
So we half use space because we don't do occupancy. We're using condition assessment. We're using the building operations, preventive maintenance. We're using the asset management tools, lease management, and property management. What else are we using? Project management, condition assessment, energy, and we're currently considering waste management.
Great. Great.
Oh, and room reservations. I think that's it.
Not least.
Yeah.
Great. Well, listen, thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation. I certainly learned lots, and I think probably everybody on the line, you definitely don't want to make change for change's sake. I think, you know, understanding where you're going and what's available and what makes the most sense is a good way to proceed. So. Next up, we have mobile asset management with Tiffany Lamb. Tiffany's one of our application architects here at Horizon, and she's been with us a couple of years. She also comes from the user world before that, but I will turn things over to her and let her walk through show you some of the product. Tiffany, are you there?
Yes. All right.
Fantastic.
And I believe I just got my screen shared going, so that's great. And thank you for the earlier presentation, Murray, and being able to see some Japanese words and Dilbert, as those are one of my favorite things. So today, my portion is going to be demonstrating ARCHIBUS 23.1, and it will be running on the mobile framework of 2.0. So with the ARCHIBUS mobile piece, as you can see on the slide deck, we have it running within Android, Apple tablets, and Windows 8 iPhones. And the focus today, because within the framework of the mobile piece, is that there are sections of apps that really map back to ARCHIBUS applications. So this is actually our main focus, is within the world of asset and equipment surveys, which really help us continue to maintain the list of equipment and assets that we have. We have an asset and equipment registration piece, which is kind of the first step for you to build an inventory from scratch. And then past that, you want to be able to run assessments where you would want to track statuses and conditions. So those three kind of concepts do go into spelling the life cycle of asset management. And ARCHIBUS is there to facilitate that management of the life cycle, from the registering of the assets into the system from day one. And then you manage the assets over time with a combination of different parts of ARCHIBUS, such as the maintenance piece, through your surveys, through move management, and all that really will tear down and change the life cycle and the use of those assets. And later you'd want to be able to evaluate their conditions and their life spans remaining, and eventually it'll lead to the end cycle, which is the disposal piece. And we'll kind of speak to how the mobile app covers those areas within the life cycle. So we'll get ready for the demo, which is going to be on an emulator. And this picture here is just to show the representation of, with the mobile piece on a phone or tablet, you'd be able to call upon the camera feature of the device and therefore be able to use the built-in scanner. So that, with that being said, I can now showcase the emulator part of the demo. So this is the mobile framework, and here's our main features here. So we're going to start from the registration piece as a day one concept. So let's pretend we're sitting at or standing at a loading dock, and certain assets may arrive here first. So we want to be able to, either we're registering them individually, or something comes as a crate and they're all the same kind of assets, but you do need to register all of those pieces. So you have those two features from the start. So this demo will just add in a few. And we'll have some common asset data sets to fill in, because I mentioned this would be, for example, a crate of the same printers that came in. So there's going to be some common language among those three printers. One of the options we could do is we can start by just saying, I'm going to barcode scan them in to register them. Or I could use incremental codes. So I'll show you what this does, and it really is just to generate the next code for us. And one of the things what you have as options is you can specify a prefix. So if I'm looking at a barcode I need to generate, I might say it needs to start with a certain nomenclature. Maybe because I have printers, I want to start with this particular prefix. And the next piece is the system will start going back on the database. So this is a connection that is live to the ARCHIBUS stream to get the last available number that's on the database. So then my next start number, no matter what I'm going to start off with, is going to be the next available number, being the number 7. And I can specify how many items I'm going to add, and that can either be me typing them in, or I can press this plus sign to get a number of 3. So that's what the incremental codes are for. That's in the situation where, let's say you are going to print out a barcode after you've generated those codes. However, that might not be actually the most effective way to do it, because that would mean you'd have to wait, go to a printer, you'd have to wait for them to print out the codes, and then you can use it. So the other alternative really is just saying you've got a pre-printed barcode roll. So these are stickers that you haven't used in the inventory yet. So I would be able to just pull one of the scanners from one of the barcodes from the roll, and then put it on my piece of equipment, and then scan that barcode. So as you can see here, this prefix that I originally put in there, that's been grayed out. since that is no longer relevant in this particular sample. So the next piece there is that common language. So I said there are 3 printers. So I would go and look for my equipment standards so that that would be applied to all 3 of those items. If I pull up my equipment standards list, I can certainly search for anything that mentioned a printer or LaserJet. And if I don't see my list here, I can certainly add my brand new equipment standard. And since I do see the item, it does exist, I can certainly pick that and bring that over to my form. As we are in the loading dock, our equipment status would simply say that we were in storage for now. At this point, we would say that it's located at my particular warehouse. So I could go and pull up my building codes and specify the buildings that might be that warehouse building in this case. I can go as far down to the floor and room details within ARCHIBUS. So let's go ahead and pick one of the rooms. At this point, I might actually know which division or department has purchased these assets. So I can go ahead and fill that in. We'll just go ahead and say it is a human resource division that's purchased that. And if there's any other additional comments we want to fill in, or if you want to associate that with an employee, those are all optional items I can fill in. And we'll start being ready to add in the individual equipment. So now, as you notice at the bottom part here, we have a 1 out of 3. So that lets me scan the equipment one at a time and get them into the system. And you can see that this form has been pre-filled with those details I put in previously. So now, within the ARCHIBUS app, there is this barcode button. And with the phone or the portable device, you would have a camera, and it would have that built-in scanner tool within the ARCHIBUS app. So it would be using your camera and converting that barcode into the form for the equipment code. And it does read most of the common barcodes out there and many others. So it's not limited to only EAN 13 and 8, the UPCs A and UPCEs, code 39, code 128, ITF. Those are the most commonly used barcode types, but it'll also handle RFID tags, data matrices, and many more. So basically, by clicking that, will activate the camera, and then it will put in the code for our equipment. And the same thing we could do is we can also scan in a serial number from our item there. So we'll go next. And now you can see we just repeat that process. The rest of this is consistent. We could change it for this one piece of equipment if it's different from the rest. But we can keep going and add in the additional details. So the next number is now the 8, and I'll just quickly finish this up with the 9th item. So now I've scanned all 3 printers that were at the loading dock. I've got stickers on them, and they're all in storage and ready to go. So that gives me a confirmation list of the things I will be able to complete and therefore upload to the database of ARCHIBUS there. So the ARCHIBUS mobile app does allow us to work in an offline mode. So right now this is still sitting on my mobile queue. And once I hit the complete, that's where we'll be putting that officially into the ARCHIBUS Web Central for others to access. So now the next piece is the assets were sitting at a dock and they need to be moved and relocated. So one of the things we're going to do is a asset survey. And we'll visit this a few times throughout the life cycle because the surveys actually serve several perspectives. For example, in this case, we would want to move assets from the warehouse to the desired location. And then from a real life perspective, you'd want to be able to keep inventorying the assets and confirm that they're all still in status and working order. So that could be something like a yearly survey you'd want to perform. And then the last stage of life is when you've confirmed that those assets are at the end of life cycle and you're going to mark up which ones are in such bad status that you'd have to put them towards disposal. So that's kind of the idea what the survey framework lets you do. And it'll give you a set of questions you'd want to ask for your particular survey. So with that having said, let's visit the warehouse piece. So the purpose of this one, it would be serving to gather all the assets that are currently in my warehouse, and I need to move them to its proper, more permanent location. So I can certainly see that I have a list of the assets that are currently part of my workflow to move. I can certainly view it on a floor plan as well in ARCHIBUS, so that everything's all on that same floor in this case, and all in the same room. So if I had different areas, then I'd have more rooms highlighted. And I'll come back right here actually to the list view. So I'll start off with one of my printers here. Within here, I might have different questions or different fields I want to track. So this time now I might be more specific. I might want to designate it to an exact department within the Human Resources Division. And at this point, because it's no longer going to be within the warehouse, I want to clear that information and I want to specify that it's now at the new space. So we will say HQ. It's going to be moved to our headquarters office. I'll pick my floor. And we'll grab our room list. And as you might notice that as I've filled in the building code, I filled in the floor code, that has restricted my room list to be reflective of everything on that 15th floor. We can now fill in additional comments for our survey, and as well as use our device and take a picture for our survey. So now when I come back and look in my documents piece, I can see I have a 1 there, and I'll be able to take a look at in the future for the picture that was taken at that time. So I'll complete that. And you can see we have some pre-filled information there for the date last surveyed. And I can keep flipping through the one, this is the 1 out of 6. We can keep going through to get to the 2 out of 6 and complete the rest. If I come back to this list here and come back to my floor plan, for example, now you might notice that I've got a new location for that one piece of equipment there. We would be able to then compare that, compare that to a different location and see where the floor plan of it would be, or where would it be in the floor plan. So the next level of that survey would be the constant inventorying of the items. So let's say bi-yearly, we need to confirm that these assets, we can plug them into the wall and they work. So that will still give us the same idea there. We have a list. We also can view it in a floor plan view. And these rooms are all highlighted saying that there is equipment in there. So basically now as a person with a mobile device, I might start at one corner of the building and I'd walk room to room and start seeing what kind of assets are there and update that information. If there's something new there, if things have been moved, I can certainly do that. So let's pretend I'm starting in this corridor. I might have jumped into this particular room. I see I've got 3 assets that are supposed to be in this room, so I can go look for them. If I see the barcode and I know it matches this one, that allows me to go and update its equipment status. So I can still say it's still in service, maybe it's in repair, maybe it's been missing in the worst case situation, so I can specify that kind of detail. And while I'm in that room, that gives me a list of items that are in the room. However, I might go in and I might find a piece of equipment from that list there that I couldn't really identify. So I can certainly use this filter tool, hit that barcode button, and do a search for a particular item there. And return what my choices are for there as well as rearrange that list either by equipment or by location. So now that I've got, so same workflow, find the equipment, scan it, and update the details. And you might have different fields in this particular survey to track, but that idea is that you've seen it once earlier, you've kind of got an idea of how that would work. So we have our assets over time, and I spoke about the assessment app, which is the last other sample app to go into. Within the assessments app, it really speaks towards 3 different modules in ARCHIBUS. So one of the ones you can use it for is the environmental sustainability assessment, and that's where you'd want to look at your assets and see what's eligible for upgrades so it could be more energy effective. Another piece is a commissioning assessment, where you're acquiring new assets and you're trying to perform a deficiencies checklist. And lastly, in our particular perspective today, is a condition assessment to really look into its current condition and estimate its costs for repair or maintaining, and therefore plan out budgeting. And again, the same workflow. The workflow between those 3 modules is actually very similar. So when we see one of these items here in a condition assessment, the idea and the flow would be similar whether we're going into and seeing an environmental assessment and seeing how that compares. So I'll go into this particular sample assessment I have ready, and that would be a list of particular assets I need to look at. Or therefore do the same thing and look at it from a list view, search for the particular equipment item by scanning the barcode, or I can go on the floor plan, pick my floor, and then find out which floor has an item I need to assess, as they would be highlighted in yellow. So here is a particular piece of asset I need to investigate on, and you would therefore give it a condition priority. So these are usually done by an assessor, which could be a contractor. So in this case, if you do them, then you can do that on a mobile device. Otherwise, you can certainly grant access to a contractor and have them perform this survey for you. And basically what they would do is they would use these very standard industry terms of saying something is either at some sort of facility lost or cost effective priority, and they would give it a value of some kind: poor, good, fair, unacceptable, and a recommended action. Should you replace it, remove it, adjust it? If you do replace it, then you're looking at certain estimated capital or expense costs. And they would give you some more details. And they will also have the opportunity to take further pictures of the asset itself. And therefore provide you with that list. At the end of that flow is that you would be able to go back into Web Central, and within those 3 particular modules, whichever assessment that was performed against, you'd be able to run scorecards. And that really puts all those problems on a matrix, a scoring matrix or a heat map, basically identifying what are your worst case scenarios or your worst case assets, and what that budgeted amount should be to get them into a better state. And then further plan out when you would perform that kind of work. So the last scenario, we would come back into our survey again, because we'll be talking about a disposal piece. So now you've gotten the information from a consultant that some of your assets are in really bad shape. So you want to do a survey yourself too and confirm whether they really are at that state. So I would have my list here or my floor plan. I'll go ahead and dive right in. And now this time, my survey questions are different. So within ARCHIBUS, it does give you a choice of which fields you'd want to do your survey against. And in this particular case, I've got an extra field that didn't appear before in the other surveys, and it's a mark for deletion field. So in that case, if it's in a really bad shape, I can say it's yes, and the status would be out of service. And we would complete that as well. Once that survey is completed, then the asset manager who's evaluating all that details, they could go further, complete that life cycle by going into the disposal methods. And that does fall outside of that mobile realm. And basically being able to say that the asset has been sold or salvaged in what way, or it's been really simply disposed of, and what that remaining cost value was. So with that having said, that's the end of this particular asset demo.
That's great. Thanks, Tiffany. Definitely, we'll hear a little bit more from Tiffany after Jason. Assets, I guess, are considered by ARCHIBUS to be anything from equipment all the way up to, your buildings and your portfolios or people. It's really agnostic that way. The great thing is that you can roll it up to into reports that give you a big picture of the, and ties in with the strategic financial analysis and really where the state of all your equipment, the state of your buildings, and all of those things.
I was going to just weigh in, Diana. One of the great things that Tiffany showed is she was able to demonstrate a lot of very tactical functions with the mobile applications. So we were kind of down in the weeds doing things, whether it was in the field or at a loading dock or whatever the case might be. But at the same time, you're seeing how it's bridging a lot of the kind of overarching asset management process, right? So you're really talking about the acquisitions and the maintenance and then the disposal of these assets and how the mobile framework can tie into that. So, as much as we were doing something very specific, it ties in and rolls up to asset management at a very, very high level to feed into the whole kind of enterprise decision-making that you can get with the asset management tools.
Great, cool. Okay, well, next up, guys, we have, if everybody wants to sort of stretch a little bit, we are going to have Jason DeWeese from ARCHIBUS. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I know you pretty good, but I always call you by Jason.
Yeah. I've been called way worse, Diana.
Oh, okay. He's the business development manager with ARCHIBUS. He's going to kind of walk through building information modeling and ARCHIBUS, some of the standards that are used. Basically, ARCHIBUS can pull information from a BIM model or utilize some of the information from a BIM model, just like it does with AutoCAD, whatever version, or Revit. I think, Jason, I'm going to let you show your screen in a sec.
Absolutely.
And let you take it away.
You guys see my screen here?
Yep.
Perfect. So, first of all, Diana asked me to do this presentation, and we kind of get a loose, like, okay, BIM and ARCHIBUS, right? Well, I mean, it can be any number of things, because we can talk about things all the way from, integrating facility managers in the design process down to handoff for BIM, what stakeholders are involved at what process. We could talk about Revit integration, equipment mapping, equipment systems, all the way down to space and even energy, creating that, extra dimension for volume, being able to track energy and stuff. We can talk about models. I mean, it can go on and on and on what we're talking about. There are many different sections that we could talk about. But the main question that I've been getting recently, especially from we've had a ton of inquiry from architectural firms. And the main question that I keep getting from them and from end users is, where do we start? Where is it that where do we start off with this process? Another question we get is, how long does it take? Well, it's a process. Just like any IWMS process, you didn't start off implementing an entire IWMS system, right? You start off with space, then went on to the next step, and then so on and so forth, right? Kind of the same thing here. But like you've heard with Murray's presentation, it's Danielle's presentation. Yep. We've talked about, what is the current state? What is the evaluation of where we're currently at? And then that leads to kind of creating the standards for an organization, because you're creating kind of new nomenclature, creating kind of like new versions of everything you're speaking about. When we start talking about Revit integration, we're talking about mapping databases and bringing that information over from Revit, right? We're talking about data information, right? And so we want to make sure that we have all that stuff mapped, and all that equipment is actually, everything's labeled the same way, so that it makes it extremely easy when we perform those integrations. So with standards, with BIM standards, the things that I like to talk about, and remember, this is a 15-20 minute overview, so it gets obviously way more in the weeds and way more in depth, but just to kind of give you an overview and give you an idea of what you're looking at, I like to kind of mention how we go into the data. I kind of like to mention, your IT infrastructure, establishing organizational standards, incorporating our facility managers into our architecture, engineering, construction phases of our design and build, why we're doing this, why it's important. And then I was going to show you really quickly, I was going to jump into the software, show you what it can look like once you bring in a 3D model, what that can look like in a facility management tool, but also show you some of the people who are already doing this. Obviously, it takes on a little bit more quickly over across seas, so a couple of those are some really unique examples from over in Asia and over in Europe. But we also have an educational kind of city deployment that's going on here in the States, in the United States. That's a little bit more relevant. So moving forward, talking about data, understanding your data, right? When we're talking about standards, we want to make sure that we understand, because that's what BIM is. It's a process for handling data. Quite simply put, it is a process for managing large amounts of data to pull into a facility management tool for managing the built environment, choosing that model that they create in the design process and handing it off for facilities to use it, right? So there's really three main questions you want to ask yourself at the beginning of a BIM deployment. One, who's going to use the data? Who's touching this? Why are we creating it? What are we going to collect? What data is going to be collected? That's very important, obviously. And then how is it going to be maintained? How are we actually going to maintain that data within our organization? And then validating the data, making sure that we actually validate that information, because again, even with an IWMS deployment, it's really only whatever the data you put in is as good as what you're going to get out, right? If you're putting junk in, I've heard you guys say it before yourselves, putting junk in, you're going to get junk out. And that's just as much the case with the BIM deployment, probably even more so. And so we want to make sure that we evaluate that. We want to make sure that we look at that, make sure that the information that we're feeding into the system is obviously good information. We want to start with baselines where applicable and where we're able to. So there's some processes that have already taken, they've already taken leap, and getting back to the beginning and tracking those baseline numbers and everything and getting benchmarks on them, it might be a little bit cumbersome, but at least try and get them where we can, so we understand where we started. The reason we want to do this is we want to record processes, not just for cleaning up the data, but for establishing these standards, so that anytime we do it again, we have a process in place. We know exactly where we started, how it worked with another deployment. It makes it a lot easier whenever you have relevant information to tie into, right? Moving on to the IT infrastructure, obviously we want to make sure that we have the capabilities to support a BIM implementation. This is a lot of data. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of processes that are involved here, and we need to make sure that we actually have the ability to support that. A lot of organizations don't even think about that. They don't even think, okay, do I have the ability to support a data load that a BIM deployment would bring? And that's very important to establish that. It's extremely important. When we're talking about personnel, do we have the personnel to actually handle this? Do we have the network capacity? Because we're now talking about large amounts of data that we're going to be driving in from 3D models, right? Do we have the storage hardware, file management software to archive the information? And do we understand which authorizing software like Revit is being used in the process. Do we actually have people who can use Revit? Do we have people who are trained in those programs, those softwares that we're looking to utilize? So these are really important questions that we need to ask before we even get started to make sure that we're in the right place to start a BIM deployment, right? And then establishing organizational standards. What are best practices for our BIM implementations? This kind of goes back to the thing I said earlier about handoffs. We have, and I'm going to get into it a little bit more here and down the road, but there's not just, people say the BIM, they say the model. There's not just one model. There's a series of models. There's a number of models that come into this that make this feasible. Some people like to link the models, particularly my personal my personal thought on it is I don't like linked models. They're very large, very cumbersome. If we can drive those in separately, a lot of times the system reacts a little bit better to that. But the fact is we have a number of different models that we're using, and each person has a different model that matters to them, right? And we need to establish that information. Like obviously, if we have, our MEP engineers, we want to make sure that the MEP models are accessible to them, right? We also want to make sure that any of the information that relates to our facility management, they also have access to that. We want to make sure that obviously our facility managers, people that are in charge of, equipment, people who are in charge of our facilities, our craftspeople, maintenance personnel, that they're actually touching what they need to touch too. And we also want to make sure that we're not just allowing them to touch what they need to touch, but to not touch what they don't need to touch. Obviously, just like an IWMS deployment, we want to make sure that role responsibilities are clearly established so that we understand exactly what people need what and what people need to be excluded from what. That's very important here. And on the line of organizational standards, this comes back down when we map information in, when we actually integrate with Revit, we can make this extremely easy. I tell people all the time, if you've used ARCHIBUS, if you've driven in a floor plan with AutoCAD, you are going to love Revit integration. It is very easy. You can bring in an entire building at one time. As long as you have everything mapped and labeled properly, it will make a very easy integration. All that information will come over very seamlessly. You'll have all your rooms numbered, all your equipment will already be labeled and numbered. This can be a very easy deployment. Now the problem is whenever you get a model from a designer or an engineer, and the information in the model is different than what your organizational standards are. Because then you have to go through the process of mapping those fields. You have to go through and you have to say, okay, I have to map these fields so that it shows up the way I need it to show up in ARCHIBUS, right? But if we go in beforehand, we establish those organizational standards, and we can hand that to our design and construction and engineering personnel and say, here, these are our organizational standards. This is what we call the buildings. This is how they're labeled. This is how I want them labeled. They can do that information. They can go in and they can label the floors for you. You can have a convention, a naming convention for your floors, starting in a clockwise from a certain position, right? We can even establish that information. So that anytime that they go in and they design this building, the information they're handing off to you is already ready for integration. Same thing with assets, the IDs with assets, any of the information that any of the equipment that we're mapping in ARCHIBUS. It makes it extremely easy now. We can go to manufacturer websites and we can download the pieces of equipment in a 3D model that we can put into Revit. We can just drop it in there. It's already built for us. And we can drop that into Revit, and it has all the subcomponents. It has all the different parts that are involved with it, warranties, manuals, all attached to it. All that information can be attached directly to the model. So when we drive that information over into ARCHIBUS, it is already mapped. That information is already mapped. It's already associated with that asset. And we are even working to where we can establish the relationship. So if you're talking about an an HVAC unit, we move that HVAC unit in, and it automatically asks us, this isn't on current version, but in future versions, it's going to be asking us, do we want to map this to a system, right? So then we can establish those larger connections, those equipment system connections. And so you can see here, it's very simple. As long as we can go through and we can get our naming conventions and we can create those organizational standards, start off with that information, we can make our lives really easy with a BIM implementation. Now, also one of the things that I always like to mention as far as one of the starting processes, how do we start? Make sure that you have somebody from facilities involved in every single step of the architecture, engineering, construction phase. This is extremely important because I can tell you, coming from a design background, working with architects very closely, architects think about what architects think about. They're not thinking about the life cycle of the building. They're thinking about the designing of the building. They're thinking about how things are working, conflicts, any type of problems that they might run into within the model, right? So the planning and design only takes about 1 to 2 years. Then construction and commissioning another 1 to 3 years. So that's 5 years that we've established for design and construction of the building. And then we're going to go use it for 30 to 50 years. In most cases, people who use a product, who use anything, are involved in every process of the design phase. And as whether it's questionnaires, whether it's incorporating people into the process itself, whether it's handling models, this information is usually run by the end users first. This is one of the very few industries in which we actually, a lot of architects will hand it off to somebody in the end phase, and then that's the first time our end users seeing what it looks like, seeing the actual inner workings of it, right? They may see the big overall picture, kind of how the building looks, and have some other ideas about it. But as far as the actual inner workings, the operations of the building, it's really the first time we get to touch it. So very important to integrate facilities into this as early as possible. Also, establishing standards for creating 3D models. Once you get a little bit further down the road, you can actually create standards that you hand off to architects, designers, engineers, and say, here's our processes for creating 3D models. Once you get people on staff, if you get people on staff that handle Revit, they go through and they map these different naming conventions. They map these different modeling processes, and say we want the build tree to be aligned in such a view so that it's roof under obviously level 1, level 2, but we want materials under certain materials, right? Or we want to be able to have different things named in different conventions, just like going back to naming conventions, but actually doing that for the model itself as well. And then this leads into establishing the standards for creating the 3D models, where we're talking about many different models. We're talking about MEP models, architecture models, structural models, fire, life, and safety. There's a number of different models that we're going to get out of this. This is just 4, right? This is just like 4 examples. We are going to get a number of different models that can come out of these, depending on how large the building is, the scope of the project, right? We want to make sure and establish the discipline models for that integration, so that when this information is driven into ARCHIBUS, we know exactly what type of model is for what purpose. And again, we can tie that back to the key stakeholder. And then also build, like I was saying earlier, build treat standards, materials, asset assignments, any captured views. You can take 3D model views of different views, and your organization may decide, hey, we want to see these specific views before we move on, so that we know that the information we want within this model is actually captured within this model. Or we're going to use these for marketing purposes, and we want these captured views every single time that we bring something off, a new building off, whatever the case may be. So some of the current deployments, who's actually already making this work for them? We have a few people. I want to put a few names up here to kind of give you guys an idea of some of the case studies that we have. One being Wuhan Metro. If you've been to any of the last couple of conferences, you would know Wuhan Metro is a big BIM deployment that's currently underway in Asia. The Frejus Tunnel, one of my favorite case studies as far as case studies go. It's quite a cool process story. But Frejus Tunnel links France and Italy? I don't know. I'm horrible at geography. Sorry. But it links the two, and each year they switch ownership of who manages the tunnel. And then Carnegie Mellon working with the city of Pittsburgh and a smart cities deployment. They're using a lot of BIM integration there in the Virginia Tech. So I have a couple slides here. Wuhan Metro. Oh, this came up weird. All right. But anyways, Wuhan Metro, you can see here they've done model browsing so that they can browse the model in a virtual tour. They have the BIM model that's referenced, and then the equipment info retrieval. You can go in and you can actually locate the equipment in a BIM model. You can find the equipment in the model and then see the specifics about that piece of equipment once you click on it, or you can click on the asset and it'll take you to it in the model. And then being able to attach the documents to it, have documents attached to records. And then 360-degree room views. One of the really cool pieces that they've integrated on this, being able to actually navigate the facility via actual shots, actual images through the facility, so you can actually move through the facility virtually. The Frejus Tunnel, again, one of my favorite case studies. You see here they have 7 sections of the space in a tunnel, but that didn't cover quite what they needed as well, because a tunnel is made up of many different layers. So how did they do this? They actually they have 2 ways they look at the building. One is on its side. 2, they turn it up on end and cut it into sections, so they're floors. So they've turned that building, or they've turned it into a building. They've turned an actual bridge into a building, or a tunnel into a building, so that they can cut it into sections and manage those sections appropriately. It's very genius what they did with this, but they found this process through a BIM process, through actually starting the process and saying, how is it that we're going to manage this? Who's going to manage it? Who's going to see it? And then getting their expertise. It was quite a process they went through. And then you can see here with Carnegie Mellon working with the city of Pittsburgh. This started off in 2009. It was a Smart Cities initiative used to really help drive an effort that was going on between education, municipalities, private industry. And so what they did was they created a number of different initiatives, and then kind of linked those initiatives together. And they used processes of BIM deployments, and they're using BIM to actually map streets, to map the city, to actually map infrastructure and the water and sewer systems, so that all this information links together and shows relevant to each other in an actual model, in a view. And so how does this help the organization? Well, just real quickly, just so you can see exactly what we're looking at here. Go ahead and change that so I don't get kicked off. We can actually take that information from our Revit models. We can create go into our Web Central 3D Navigator. We can take that information from Revit. We can drive that information into ARCHIBUS. And as that information comes into ARCHIBUS, it doesn't just come in floor plans, which it will. Every Revit model will capture floor plans, right? But it also gives us the ability to map it as an actual 3D model in ARCHIBUS. And so you see, as these pieces pull up, these are different floors that I'm selecting and able to turn on and off, because it's coming from a Revit model. And then we can actually highlight other pieces of this as well. We can showcase the core. We can actually view our HVAC systems. Again, this comes from MEP models, HVAC and piping. We could have plumbing in here. We can have a number of different systems that turn on and off. But this is one of the easier ways to make this happen, is actually using separate models instead of linked models. It can definitely be driven through linked models, but it's a lot easier with this. And you can see down here, we even have doors, lighting, all kinds of information, but it gives us the ability to actually map this model in 3D so that we can navigate it in 3 dimensions, right? Oops. And then again, once we click on this information, it'll give us all information pertaining to the asset that we're clicking on. Maybe. But it gives us the ability to actually interact with this model. So no longer is it just a Revit model. It's not just a model that's 3-dimensional and able to be used by labeling and attaching pieces to it, but we can actually create work orders directly from this view. We can view our space. We can see what equipment is inside of our rooms. We can actually make room assignments. We can change space. So not only is this model able to be viewed, but it's also able to be changed. We're able to generate data off of it. We're able to generate action off of it, and that's what makes it BIM. That's what makes it the actual building information modeling. And that is what I had prepared.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Jason. Definitely having, I think it's pretty powerful to be able to see buildings and our portfolios, and mostly our buildings and floors and rooms in a three-dimensional way. Certainly, it's powerful for, you know, all stakeholders. Hold on a sec. Sorry. It's certainly powerful for all stakeholders, and I think, you know, being able to link systems together is a terrific way to kind of advance the knowledge of what we have and how it relates to each other. So thanks very much for going through that. I really appreciate it, Jason. I also wanted to, I didn't get a chance earlier to mention that Jason is the author of the 1 to 3 minute videos that we've been sharing with a lot of our clients that just sort of do little snippets, sort of a snapshot, if you will, of each of the modules and those kinds of things. So if you'd like to see those and hear Jason talk more, we can definitely provide those.
There are, I don't know if you guys got them either, but there are updates. There are a few new ones too, so let me know if you need those.
Oh, yes, please. Oh,
all right. No
I should be on the top of your list there.
Just send them out. If new updates, send them out immediately. All right.
Yeah.
No problem.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. So next up we have Tiffany Lambach. She's going to talk a little bit about sensors, Internet of Things. That's another hot topic. Was recently at the workplace at the forum here in Ottawa, and the Facility Fusion show, which was in Toronto. Definitely people are wanting to know how these work, what are their options, does ARCHIBUS talk to it, and all of those kinds of things. So Tiffany, are you there?
Ready to go.
No? Fabulous. Here you go.
All right, so to start off, I've always understood that idea that one day all these electronic devices, they'd be connected and all your information will be uploaded somewhere to these massive clouds that analyze your day-to-day life, and it's already happening. So therefore, it'd be kind of a real-life version of Skynet from the Terminator series. But I suppose instead of calling it Skynet, the proper name of it is Internet of Things. So our IoT is our focus for today, and we are going to speak to it on behalf of the space utilization data. And one of the key focuses on you wanting to go into this kind of initiative is ultimately to save costs. And it might have something to do with the space utilization initiative to reduce your floor plate and increase occupancy. It could have something to do with energy reduction initiatives, where you'd want to reduce your electrical consumption. So based on occupancy, if there's someone there in the room, then the lights are on, otherwise they will remain off. And all those kinds of drivers are falling towards using those recent facility management trends. So I have the really big trends here highlighted in blue, being our mobile, big data analysis, and interoperability, and flexible workspace. And the other ones that are also very relative are in our orange, and the other ones will be in the green. So IoT really will fall heavily along our blue highlights. And that's for using those kind of tools, you would end up with IoT sensors that give you that big data, or it could be data coming from your mobile device. You will need to interface with other systems in order to drive that kind of information as well. So in terms of what is considered IoT, there are many valid methods, including manual checklists. So this sort of thing will count, although it is admittedly not the most up-to-date version for you to get your data. Other way to use, you could use a mobile survey. There is a mobile app for your space and occupancy to basically specify who sits where, is that space being occupied. You might use sensors. So that there's a few types of sensors. There's the kind where it's trying to confirm there's definitely one person in the space, versus the kind where it is spreading over a room, and basically if there's 4 people in the room, it'll register it's a valid occupancy, but it doesn't actually know the actual count. But it's, as long as it's valid, it will give that return of saying, yes, there's someone in here. And another ways are more identity-based, which are going to be your card readers, your check-in and out kiosks, including a mobile check-in and check-out to go into a meeting room or show up at a building. No matter which method you use, basically these will return some sort of yes-no value back into your big data. And for simplicity's sake, we are going to call these methods our data points for the rest of this kind of presentation, because they all have some sort of underlying similar quality to them. Based on that technology that they're going to be doing some sort of recording, whether it's every 30 minutes, every 5 minutes, or every 7 days. They're tracking a occurrence pattern, and it has some sort of value, some sort of factor, some sort of weight to them. So all these data points, they do fit into ARCHIBUS. And basically, between the frequencies, the occurrences, the values, they translate into an algorithm, and they give you a utilization percentage. So having that information of having data points will require some level of integration. And many of you guys have lived and breathed ARCHIBUS, so the term connector will ring a bell to many of you. And basically, if you haven't heard of that yet, it's essentially a framework within ARCHIBUS, and it helps you connect to another system so that ARCHIBUS and that system can speak to each other. So the data point, or the IoT sensors, for example, they are typically based on being provided by another kind of provider. If you have a card reader, if you have the sensors that are feeding that kind, or driving that kind of big data. So with that having said, let's start our space demo. And I've loaded up our favorite screen, which is the space console. There is a piece component here that you could add on, and it's the IoT utilization piece. So what I have are a few use cases. My first use case is a floor plate where the seats are definitely assigned. So there's an employee that is designated to always go to this one particular room or workstation for their day-to-day work. Your goal in this case might be to reduce your floor plate of spaces. I've got a utilization highlight running in the background, and if I don't know what that means, I can certainly pull up my legend to let me know that it means how utilized these spaces are. So anything that's in the red means that most of the time this space isn't really occupied. Anything that's green, then it does mean it's well used. As well as on my space console, there's a lower section here that gives out my list of rooms. And there's actual utilization percentages for those rooms in its exact format so that I can further do that investigation. When we look at this kind of data, it would be looking at a rather live perspective. So it would be looking at it from a time-based perspective, let's say today, so that we can make decisions in the future. Another piece that I have turned on are my employee labels here as well. So with that having said, we're going to target our red rooms, and we know that they're not being well utilized. So one of the decisions I might make is that, well, if this room is not utilized and it's ideal, I might use it for a lease or turn it into a meeting room, and maybe this user can now be moved to another location or spot where there's capacity for it, it's not fully utilized. So now I'm trying to increase the utilization of this room, reduce that one, and repurpose it. We'll save this change. In this case, there will be some more details you'd have to confirm, but basically you'd want to update the information within your space data. And as you know, with ARCHIBUS, you do have the feature of your room transactions, so that will keep a historical repository of what the rooms used to be, who used to be there, and that sort of thing, so that later on when I change this into a meeting room, I'll know yesterday it used to be an office space still. Another piece here with utilization is, right now I'm looking at the overall utilization factor. And I did mention utilization is going to be looking at a specific point of time. So what we also have as another option is a pop-up to look at the utilization rates. So this gives us options to look at what is going on at our particular floor, even at a building or room, and we can do a to and from statement. So if I'm trying to look at something for a whole month as part of my analysis, I can do that. Or I can just, in this case, I'm just going to hit and show all of that so that we can show a graph. You'll have a few use cases for doing this. For example, if you're trying to analyze how the occupancy changes during the day, you might want to go from a very particular day frame and time frame, so you can see that certain times of the day the utilization will go up and the head counts will go up and then eventually go down, and basically help us identify where do we peak in our occupancy. Now the next use case would be, say, meeting rooms. And within ARCHIBUS, I am going to pull up a different floor plan, which is going to be focused around having meeting spaces and using IoT sensors within that space to capture whether these meeting rooms are being fully utilized. So same idea here. I'm looking at my rooms that are in the red. They are meeting spaces. I might be having some sort of workflow where I'm a tenant, and for me to book these spaces, I allow my staff to book it. If they don't show up, then I'm still charged a cleaning and service fees for it. So I want to confirm over time, are my employees really using this space? So that's one situation of what you could be using this for. Could be many, for example, even if you want to look at which meeting spaces you'd want to eventually renovate. There will be some digging you'd have to do, and that will all fall within ARCHIBUS data. Anything from comparing, well, what kind of amenities are in this room? Is it because one room is too warm and the other one is the perfect temperature, so therefore everyone prefers to use the meeting space here instead of the one in the red? And that's where you would use this kind of information for as well. So within that, the idea of the information is consistent that way, but we would have different reporting needs and drivers of why we would use IoT with this information.
Hey, Tiffany, I'll just jump in on a couple of examples in terms of conversations with clients.
Yes.
For a lot of the clients that are using ARCHIBUS in its, call it native capacity, they're certainly taking advantage of things like room reservations or hoteling and the ability to book desks or to book meeting rooms. What the utilization layers into, as you're highlighting in this, is this idea of, we have perhaps 100% booking of a space, but we don't have 100% utilization. So the sensors and the whole IoT bring that to the foreground so that people can see exactly what's going on in the space. So what it does is it actually influences a number of things. Tiffany touched on a couple of them, which is the idea of spaces that are just underutilized. But it leads directly to the idea of influencing the design. So when a lot of organizations are getting into unassigned desks, but they might be assigning a high ratio of desks to employees. And they really have no way of knowing, I've got 200 desks that I've made available to 300 employees. Do I really need that many desks? Do I need more desks? So that's the first thing that you start being able to see is the idea of quantity. The other thing is in the meeting rooms. The meeting rooms might be underutilized because of the location, or it could be that the amenities that are in the room influence that. So again, the design of the space starts getting influenced by the tracking of the utilization. So as much as we're trying to reduce footprints, and that's where again utilization can help, the whole idea of IoT can help us with respect to the overall design. We're seeing a lot of innovative and exciting spaces, but the question is, how are those spaces being used? And so that's where we start seeing this whole metric that Tiffany's showing here of being able to not only tell us how somebody's booking it, but also how somebody's using it.
All right, thank you, Wayne. And actually, it's great that you mentioned the workspaces, because that is our final use case on this particular, on another floor of this within this building. So this is a floor plate where it's actually following that alternative workspace strategy, and you want to confirm how utilized are these spaces really. And one of the things we have here within ARCHIBUS is another piece called Teams. So right now I've got a listing of my highlights of Teams. So let's rearrange this information a little bit. I'll switch my highlights to my Teams so that the colors will line up to this legend. And we'll switch the borders so that the borders will represent that utilization. So now what I want to look at is any of these spaces that have the red border or they have the green border, because again, that will represent something is underutilized or overutilized. The idea with the team spaces is that they're kind of a to work with your temporary and long-term space assignments. You'd have the idea of a team members that will change over time so that your spaces also will have to reflect on that and change over time. So again, time, everything will be time-based. So we're looking today, and we can certainly change the details for later and have that as part of our planning. In 2020, for example, we might change the space. So we're trying to use today's data to confirm how that layout's going to impact us later on. If I want to look at one of these spaces here, we have something called a seat ratio to actual ratio. So that would mean the amount of people that are allowed to share this one particular space that's designated. So the spaces here that are in purple, they are hitting a high seat ratio. I can certainly edit that space. And that space will consist of rooms. They will have a listing of employees that give us a seat ratio. And basically, I would be able to specify, well, what is my target space ratio? I would target that I wanted to hit this 1.5 amount. And my IoT data, along with this space data, is giving me details as to how I should better manage this space. So right now, I've hit over the seat ratio target percentages. So that would mean I should either deduct employees off this team, but that might be harder to change because employees are trying to work together in the space. But what I could change is the rooms. So the rooms, again, themselves, they would have a start and end date. But in this case, I will quickly close this particular window for a second and come back out here. Because within the Space Console, it does give me options to make that change here. So I can go and edit. Oh, sorry, I wanted to hit assign. So we'll assign, and because these spaces are being utilized already, I might want to release more spaces to this team. So I'll give them this space in this pod. The next time the IoT sensors are reading where these guys are, we'd be able to confirm how utilized that will become in a later date as well. So by using today's information, I'm just showing you that we're able to go ahead and use IoT data to confirm our future targets of space planning. So that's the end of this piece here. So I'll be passing that back to Ayana.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks so much, Tiffany. Appreciate your time and effort in preparing the demos as well for everyone. We are going to get to some Q&A, hopefully, and open it up a little bit to field some questions and things. But first, we definitely want to unmute Murray and his group. Over the years, the last couple of years, we've had an opportunity, or I've had an opportunity to see some really active groups, you know, with 25, 50, or even up to 75 people in the room, kind of collaborating and talking about their installs. I would be remiss if I didn't thank some of the people who have done demos on their specific installs in the past. People like BCIT, you guys are on the line. I know you did a great job on how you've customized ARCHIBUS to work in your building ops and your platform and where you've gone with it. Also City of Brampton, and also Simon Fraser University. Irene's on the line as well. People like the City of Hamilton has also done great presentations and talked about, and the City of Brampton have pulled together a lot of people. So it's great these kinds of synergies are happening. And I just, before we kind of get caught up in the Q&A, I definitely want to recommend that you do get active and participate. You're online now, and make sure you do step out to the face-to-face ones. If you want to present, if you have ideas about what should be presented, or if you are willing to host a group, if you let myself know, or your AUG leader know, or ARCHIBUS know, then we'll make sure that things happen. If you need some help with speakers, or content, or details, or admin, or any of that kind of stuff. So we're here to help, and there's lots of great, there's LinkedIn groups, there's lots of places where you can get information. There's also white papers and brochures and recordings. You can go to YouTube and pull down our 23.1 webinar. We can send you links if you have trouble locating anything, or they're on ARCHIBUS, horizon.com or .ca or archibus.com. So, but let's talk a little bit about Q&A. What we maybe, as you come through, as you listen to the presentations today, maybe there's some things that you'd want to hear about. Let me know. The chat here is pretty quiet, so I don't actually have any Q&A questions.
I'll let you try and get some of those Q&A chats going. And I'll just, first of all, thank Diana for coordinating the session and the efforts that she puts forward on the user group meetings. I think you've all seen, so much appreciated. She's always keen on sharing information and you guys collaborating. So appreciate Jason, you coming on and participating today on behalf of ARCHIBUS and presenting some of the information. Of course, Murray and Tiffany and our friend at NRC, Danielle, has signed off, unfortunately, but much appreciated for him participating as well. So keep in mind that, we want to keep these sessions going and keep them open and keep the dialogue amongst the user community going strong. So keep any sort of input going. I noticed that Murray's got a question about how much of the information in the BIM demo was in ARCHIBUS versus the BIM model. So that's a question for Jason. So Jason, how much of the information in the BIM demo was actually in ARCHIBUS versus in the BIM model?
So the piece that I showed at the very end, is that what he's referring to?
Yes.
Yeah, so the piece at the very end, that was all ARCHIBUS. That information was driven directly from Revit, but I was showing you ARCHIBUS. So that was everything that we were in was in ARCHIBUS, and everything from the model can come over, even shared parameters. In other words, things that aren't necessarily mapped to come over to ARCHIBUS, we can create that connection, map them, and send them over. One of the things recently was lighting. Now lighting is a typical parameter that we map over in ARCHIBUS, but typically we didn't really, we knew what lights were, we knew that they were in the facility, we would just say a light in the room. But the lighting within that facility, and the one that I was showing you when I clicked on the lighting, any of those lights were shared parameters that were mapped over. Does that answer the question?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay.
I think too, there's a lot of hybrid kind of things going on where he said that with BIM models, they are huge. They do take up a lot of computing power and a lot of
yes, they do
things. But there's also same with the Internet of Things. Like when you have a million sensors, aggregate or pulling out data. there's, you want to determine, first of all, how much, how often you're going to be getting that information, and when you're reporting on that information. I know also that data aggregators or cloud options are possible, or hybrid, which would kind of go through. I may not have the terminology here, but I know there's sort of portals that can be for security reasons and for some people. So there's ways to kind of offset the computing power for organizations that are interested in getting into, working with BIM models and working with IoT options.
Absolutely. Has anybody else heard of the term AOT recently? Has that come up in any topics of conversation?
AOT?
AOT. I've had it a few times come up recently. So there's this idea that you have IoT, Internet of Things, but you need something to decipher that information or decipher that data into information, or else it's just data, right? And so the analysis of things is what it's referring to. It's whatever that data aggregator is that's actually, whether it's ARCHIBUS, whether it's another platform, another application that's taking that information, like Nest. You have a Nest thermostat, right? But without the application, without the Nest application, it does nothing. And so that's kind of the idea, is determining what platform you're going to use for that. What's the information I got to pull? What do I need it to say? And what am I going to use at that point? And that's one of the things that I've heard recently with some people called it analysis of things. I've heard it a few times now, and so I thought that was unique. I thought I would just share that. I'm
kind of relieved, Jason. I thought you were taking a shot at the Canadians by, putting an A into the conversation.
AOT, right? No.
Well, if I have unmuted some folks, so if there's ambient noise, like I don't hear any, so you can remute yourselves. But if anybody, we can open it up. I mean, we are finishing up. We still got another 8 minutes to go. If I don't see some questions in the chat line, or people putting their hands up in the attendee boxes, then I do have a poem I could share on the Internet of Things that was on main stage. So I'm just warning you.
I'd recommend you run the other way right now. So we'll leave it at that.
Wayne's modest. He was. If you got our recent newsletter, at one of the lightning talks, Wayne got up and out of his comfort zone, I'm told, and did an IoT poem that was great. I mean, everybody was asking for it afterwards. That was down at Nexus, so you folks might have missed that. So
it's Murray here.
Yep,
I just want to reiterate, if anybody has any questions or they feel they should have been part of the Alberta ARCHIBUS users group, please feel free to contact me and I will respond.
Yeah, ARCHIBUS has posts user groups on their website as well. So if you're looking for, I think the cross collaboration of these is really what will make them unique and beneficial. And I know this particular one has been mostly presentations. Doing a cross Canada one, I was a bit worried because people don't really know each other and things like that. I thought it would make a better format for this type of thing, but obviously the face-to-face and people should feel included, and the knowledge is good in the hands of the users and the business partners, and everyone's really welcome. So.
And everybody get out and enjoy Canada's 150th.
Absolutely. Okay, well, so like I said, I don't see anything in the chat, so hopefully you found this informative. I will end up with the Internet of Things, the poems, so you can dive off if you'd like. These, hopefully, we are looking to maybe schedule some things in the fall. I am looking to get feedback on what you'd like to hear about, and if you need any resources or information, reach out to any of us on the line there. And with that, I guess we'll call it. I'll read you Wayne's poem, unless I can get him to do it again. I'm smiling at him now. It's right here.
No, it's so good. You can go for it.
Are you sure?
Yeah, boss.
Okay. Okay, guys. So here we go. And I'm not a poet, and this is the first time I've read it. So, so IoT, managing things you can't see, places you can't be. Will it replace me? Internet of Things, mobilizing, analyzing, monitoring, simplifying, complicating. Steve Segura says it's here, it's near, there's nothing to fear. But why, oh why, does my freezer need to talk to my blender? Is it going to make my life easier? Whether a boomer, a Gen Xer, a betweener, I just need help with my internet provider. Apparently my car will soon take me places without any eco traces. But officer, it wasn't me. Google told my car to do it. Ubiquity, connectivity, smart city. Is that a camera looking at me? Should I look at my computer and wave? Kellyanne tells me it's my microwave. Where will it end? What's the next trend? From deeper, a portable fish finder, to Cinder, a sensor cooker, to Snappy for smart home energy. IoT will remind me to check in on the baby, will guilt me into activity, or will make me into virtual reality. When all I really want is a good cup of coffee. Brad and Michael say AWS, if you're serious. It's okay, it's all ARCHIBUS. But is it cloud? But is the cloud in the air? Is it something that I wear? Should I care? Did it just move that chair? From Fitbit to Fitbark, do I really need to track my dog's walk in the park? But wait, IoT, where's the hoverboard that Marty promised me? Wise Cho says, connect the dots, and yet I'm all tangled up in knots because my phone has its own thoughts. Hey Siri, are you watching me? Multilingual and Web Central with new features and enhancements, strategic financial analysis, 3D navigator, and all that stuff. Oops. So that's it, guys. So I guess this will be a wrap. Murray, thank you so much for bringing your group into the fold. I think I might have missed the last line of the poem. But I loved it. I thought, and I think a lot of people did really enjoy it at the conference, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it too. So thanks again for joining us, folks.
Thanks for organizing, Ayana. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Bye, guys. Okay.